Okay. I need your help with this. This is not a copypasta. This is a long read, but I feel like my safety or well-being could very well depend on this. This is video game related, specifically Majora's Mask. And this is the creepiest shit that's ever happened to me in my entire life. Having said that, I recently moved into my dorm room, starting as a sophomore in college. And a friend of mine gave me his old Nintendo 64 to play. I was stoked. To say the least, I could finally play all those old games of my youth that I hadn't touched in at least a decade. His Nintendo 64 came with a yellow controller and a rather shoddy copy of Super Smash Bros. And whilst beggars can't be choosers, needless to say, it didn't take long until I became bored of beating up level 9 CPUs. That weekend, I decided to drive around a few neighborhoods, about 20 minutes or so off campus, hitting up the local garage sales, hoping to score on some good deals from ignorant parents. I ended up picking up Pokemon Stadium, GoldenEye, fuck yeah, F-Zero, and 2 other controllers for $2. Satisfied, I began to drive out of the neighborhood when the last house caught my attention. I still have no idea why it did. There were no cars, and only one table was set up with random junk on it. But something sort of drew me there. I usually trust my gut with these things, so I got out of the car and was greeted by an old man. His outward appearance was, for lack of a better word, displeasing. It was odd. If you asked me to tell you why I thought he was displeasing, I couldn't really pinpoint anything. There was just something about him that put me on edge. I can't explain it. All I can tell you is that if it wasn't in the middle of the afternoon and there wasn't other people within shouting distance, I wouldn't have even thought of approaching this man. He flashed a crooked smile at me and asked what I was looking for. I immediately noticed he must be blind in one of his eyes. His right eye had a glazed-over look about it. I forced myself to look into his left eye, instead trying not to offend, and asked him if he had any old video games. I was already wondering how I could politely excuse myself from the situation when he would tell me he had no idea what a video game was, but to my surprise, he said he had a few ones in an old box. He assured me he'd be back in a jiffy, and turned to head back to the garage. As I watched him hobble away, I couldn't help but notice what he was selling on his table. Littered across his table were rather peculiar paintings. Various artworks that looked like ink blots that a psychiatrist might show to you. Curious, I looked through them. It was obvious why no one has visited this guy's garage sale. They weren't exactly aesthetically pleasing. As I came for the last one, for some reason it looked like Majora's Mask. The same heart-shaped body with little spikes protruding outwards. Initially, I thought that just since I was secretly hoping to find that game at garage sales, some Freudian bullshit was projecting itself into the ink blots. But, given the events that happened afterwards, I'm not so sure now. I should have asked the man about it. I wish I would have asked the man about it. After staring at the Majora-shaped blot, I looked up and the old man was suddenly there again, arm's length in front of me, smiling at me. I admit I jumped out of reflex and laughed nervously as he handed me a Nintendo 64 cartridge. It was the standard gray color, except someone had written Majora on it in black permanent marker. I got butterflies in my stomach as I realized what a coincidence this was and asked him how much he wanted for it. The old man smiled at me and told me that I could have it for free, that it used to belong to a kid who was about my age that didn't live here anymore. There was something weird about how the man phrased that, but I didn't really pay attention to it then. I was too caught up in not finding this game, but for getting it for free. I reminded myself to be a bit skeptical of this, since it looked like a pretty shady cartridge. There's no guarantee it'd work. But then the optimist inside me interjected that maybe there was some sort of kind of beta or pirated version of the game. And that was all I needed to be back on Cloud 9. I thanked the man and smiled at me and saying goodbye then. At least that's what it sounded like to me. All the way in the car ride home, I had a nagging doubt that I heard the man say something else. My fears were confirmed when I booted up the game. To my surprise, it worked just fine. And there was one save file, simply named Ben. Goodbye, Ben. He was saying goodbye, Ben. I felt bad for the old man, obviously a grandparent and obviously going senile. And for some reason or another, I reminded him of his grandson Ben. Out of curiosity, I looked at the save file. Eyeballing it, I could tell he was pretty far in the game. He had almost all the masks, 3 out of 4 of the remaining bosses. I hardly noticed that he hadn't used an owl statue to save his game. He was on day 3 by the Stone Tower Temple, with hardly an hour left before the moon would crash. I remember thinking that it was a shame that he had came so close to beating the game but never finished it. I made a new save file called Link out of tradition and started the game, ready to relive my childhood. For such a shady-looking game cartridge, I was impressed at how smoothly it ran, just like a retail copy of the game. Save for a few minor hiccups here and there, like textures being where they shouldn't be, random flashes of cutscenes at odd intervals, but nothing too bad. However, the only thing that was a little bit unnerving was that at times the NPCs would call me Link, and at other times they would call me Ben. I figured it was just a big bug, a fluke in the game. Programming causing our files to get mixed up or something. It did kind of creep me out, though. After a while, it was around after I had beaten the Woodfall Temple, I regrettably went into the save files and deleted Ben. I'd intended to preserve the game file, just out of the original owner's respect. It's not like I needed 2 files anyway. Hoping that it would solve the problem, it didn't. Now my NPCs wouldn't call me anything. Where my name should be in the dialogue box, there was just a blank space. My save file was just still called Link, though. Frustrated and with homework to do, I put the game down for the day. I started playing the game again last night, getting the Lens of Truth working my way towards completing the Snowhead Temple. Now some of you hardcore Majora's Mask players know about the 4th day glitch. For those who don't know, you can Google it. But this is the gist of it. Right as the clock is about to hit 0 on the final day, you talk to the astronomer and look through the telescope. If you time it right, the countdown appears and you essentially have another day to finish whatever you were doing. Deciding to try the glitch and finish the Snowhead Temple, I happened to get it right on the first day. And the time counter at the bottom disappeared. However, when I pressed B to exit the telescope, instead of being greeted by an astronomer, I found myself from the Majora boss fight room at the end of the game. The trippy boxed-in arena. Staring at the Skull Kid hovering above me, there was no sound, just him floating in the air above me, and the background music, which was regular for the area, but still creepy. Immediately, my palms began to sweat. This was definitely not normal. The Skull Kid never approached me here. I tried moving around the area. No matter where I went, the Skull Kid would always be facing me. Not saying anything, nothing would happen. And this kept on for around 60 seconds. I thought the game bugged or something, but I was beginning to doubt that very much. I was about to reach for the reset button when the text appeared on the screen. You're not sure why, but you apparently have had a reservation. I initially realized that text You get that message when you get the room key from Anju at the Stockpot Inn. But why was it playing here? I refused to entertain the notion that almost as if the game was trying to communicate with me. I started to navigate the room again, testing to see if that was some sort of trigger that enabled me to interact with something here. Then I realized I was stupid to even think that someone could reprogram the game like this. This was absurd. Sure enough, 15 seconds later, another message appeared on the screen. And again, like the first one, it was already a pre-existing character's phrase. Go to the lair of the temple's boss, yes or no. I paused for a second, contemplating what I should press and how the game would react. Then I realized that I couldn't select no. Taking a deep breath, I selected yes, and the screen faded to white. With the words dawn to a new day, with the subtext 5, 6 beneath it. When I was ported to where I was ported to, filled me with the most intense sense of dread and impending fear I had never ever experienced. The only way I can describe the way I felt here is having a feeling of inexplicable depression. On a profound scale, I'm normally not a depressed person, but the way I felt here was a feeling that I didn't even know existed. It was such a twisted, powerful presence that seemed to wash over me. I appeared in some sort of weird Twilight Zone version of the clock tower. I walked out to the clock tower as you normally do when you start from day 1, only to find that the inhabitants were gone. Usually at the 4th day glitch, you can find the guards and the dogs that run around outside the tower. This time they were all gone. What replaced them was an ominous feeling that there was something out there in the same area as me, and that was watching me. I had 4 hearts to my name and the hero's bow, but at this point I wasn't even considered for my avatar. I felt that personally I was in some kind of danger. Perhaps the most chilling thing was the music. It was the song of healing ripped straight from the game itself, but played in reverse. The music would get louder, building up, so you should expect something to pop out behind you. But it never did. And the constant loop can't wear on my mental state.